It's quite important to be able to say no to things, to reject things that you don't enjoy or don't like that aren't a good fit, and then move on. And it's also rather difficult to do that because we have a tendency to want to go all in on something, and then we're disappointed because we're sort of forcing ourselves to be invested in something that our heart's not really into. And it could be an MMO. Like, for example, I tried to have fun with Final Fantasy 14. I think it's a really nice game, but I didn't really enjoy it. And I know there's other people who've played the game who I like. Like, I think Asmongold gave it a try. He's pretty cool. Um, Zeppla is an amazing YouTuber, and she's really, really into that game. Some of these YouTubers who I really enjoy got into that game, and so I kind of wanted to get into it a bit more too. And that's natural. When you like somebody, you kind of want to do what they're doing. So streamers and content creators have a significant influence to make other people want to engage with content, which is great. But it's also important to realize that you don't have to consume the same content that a creator is consuming to like what that creator has to offer. It's also important to realize that maybe a game is good for somebody, but it's not a good fit for you. Now, for example, in the case of Final Fantasy XIV, despite being a fundamentally great MMO in many regards that a lot of people really enjoy, the world doesn't feel open and explorable. It doesn't feel open-ended in the way a more sandbox style game does. So something like the Lord of the Rings Online or ESO or a sandbox game appeal a lot more to me, simply because my favorite things to do in an MMO is usually the random things. It's setting off, not really having any particular set destination, doing things quite often by myself, and just having fun being part of a broader world, and quite possibly playing solo when I want, how I want, but knowing that there's other people in the world with me. So it feels more immersive than a single player RPG, where it's just you and the computer. It is a world filled with other people that you can interact with directly or indirectly, perhaps just by selling something or by interacting with the chat or casually being part of a guild. Now, on the topic of guilds, in ESO, I've come to realize that there's different kinds of guilds. There are a lot of different kinds of guilds, actually. Some of them are really geared toward PvP players and competitive players who are really determined to min max or understand all of the intricacies of the game's mechanics. And that's great. But it's, again, not really me. Not really me. Like, I'm the person who's more likely to just want to run around gathering plants and selling them casually, and I'm not very likely to really care too much about how the combat mechanics work. So, the point I'm getting at is when you decide what group you're going to be part of, it's important not to get sucked into something that's not a good fit for you. If you're mostly a PvE player, you didn't want to join a guild that's all about PvP. If you're a casual person that just wants to play when you want, how you want, then maybe you don't want to join a guild that's really intense and focused on people getting together to do specific things at specific times, because then the guild starts to feel more like a social obligation than a privilege that brings joy into your life. Or maybe you like the idea of roleplay. I do. Like, I like the idea of Dungeons and Dragons, sort of fantasy role playing, and yet I'm not really hardcore into anything like that. So I can definitely see being interested by a role playing guild of some kind, but then if I actually tried to join, I wouldn't really enjoy it, because now it requires a bit too much of me to get the most out of it. So maybe for me, the best guild I can be part of is just something that's super casual, something that's more geared toward just sign up and then occasionally sell something, or occasionally say hello to somebody in the Discord, or just say good evening to people if you happen to be on at the same time as they are. Just light kind of activity. Is that the best guild in the game? No, not necessarily, but it might be the best one for me because it suits my play style. And that's where sometimes we have a fantasy of what we want to be. We want to be all in. We want to be really defined by one particular thing. But the truth is, as appealing as that sounds, it's not really us. And so you have to make a distinction between what you think you want and what you really want. And, it's like when I was a teenager, I thought, well, I would like to be an airline pilot. I'm sure there were some other things that I thought over a period of time that I wanted to do. But at that time, I didn't really understand everything that would go into the process of doing those things I wanted to do. I had this general idea of something that seemed quite cool. But the truth was, I didn't want to commit fully to the lifelong experience of pursuing that path. And as a teenager, I wouldn't have really understood what all would go into that path. So it was very easy to have this idea of, well, I want to go do that one day, but not really mean it. And I didn't know I didn't mean it because it seemed legitimate, but I wasn't really interested in it that much. I wish I was. I wanted to be, in a way, but I wasn't. That was the truth. So you just have to learn to be conscious of your feelings and conscious of what kind of an experience different things give you. And if things don't bear good fruit in your life, like they're just not really giving you a good experience, then don't be afraid to say no and just not do something because it's not really doing you any good. I used to be part of a fraternal organization, the Freemasons, and I joined. And that organization, it's pretty much a lot of older gentlemen who are kind of like retired military or something like that. And usually the clubs don't have that many members. So what happens is, if you're the young guy who's joined, then you wind up volunteering for all the different things, not just the fraternal organization's fun activities, if you will, but all of the extra businessy things like volunteering to do maintenance on the building or volunteering to go pull weeds or whatever it might be. And then you start to get more and more into it. And then after a while, for me, it started to feel like a chore because it seemed like there's an endless amount of content that I needed to engage with, that I needed to make myself part of. And it really felt like I was paying money to work a job. And that's something at some point where you come to and you say to yourself, why am I doing this? Like, it doesn't really make that much sense. Like, I don't have to do this at all. I'm part of this group because it's supposed to be enjoyable and fun. And instead, it's just a lot of responsibility that I don't need to have. I'm just assuming it because, I'm already into it too far or something. So then after a while of that, I kind of burned out and then I lost interest. And then I looked back and I thought, well, I probably would have had a better experience. Everybody would have had a better experience if I would have just said, you know what? I don't want to do every single thing there is to do. So I'm going to kind of sit on the side and I'm going to go to the meeting once a month and I'm just going to drink coffee with you guys. And I'm not really going to be super serious about it. I wanted to be invested and involved, but there's a limit. And finding that balance keeps you from burning out. Just not getting into things that you don't really truly enjoy, whether it's a game or a relationship or anything in life. Just learning to not go in full bore, because I think a lot of people are all in and then they're all out. And that's sort of a fault, I guess. And I think a lot of the people who go all in are also the most likely to burn out. Like, think about the release of New World when that first came out. Everybody went and they got New World and they started playing it. And there's some things I don't like about that game. Enough to say I can't say it's really a top favorite MMO for me. But it's also a really nice game. It's a very cool game. There's a lot of good things about New World. And I wouldn't say that I really burned out on New World. I just kind of feel like there's other games I'd rather put my time into than that one. So for right now, I'm pretty content to say New World's shelved. But that doesn't mean I burned out on it. It's just I only have so much time to play MMOs. They're not like other games where you can just jump from one to the next and load up your save file after a while and then pick up where you left off. They're games where you kind of benefit more from being consistently invested in one. So there is that, and I'm not going to probably be playing New World, at least right now. I don't feel like I want to. But New World was not a bad game, like a lot of people said. It was a decent game. In some ways, it was an excellent game. In some ways, it wasn't. But people burned out on it a lot in the beginning because they went in so hard. They were so obsessed with it. They are so determined to jump in on day one, grind to end game, be max level as quickly as possible. And they burned out. They just got tired of it. They got sick of it. They had so much of it that they just got to the point where they hated the game. And then all those things that were not perfect about it just stood out so much more because they had too much. It's like an ice cream only diet. You go get your ice cream once in a long while. If you don't eat ice cream very much, then even if it's not that great of ice cream, you're probably going to like it because it's a once in a rare blue moon treat. But if you live on ice cream all the time, then at some point you just get sick of it. There's nothing special about it anymore. So having some moderation too, to understand saying no doesn't necessarily mean closing a door 100% forever. It's like if I said, well, because I'm not playing New World right now, that means I'm never going to play New World again in my life. Well, I don't know that that's really the right way to go. That's a little bit extreme. It's totally fine to say not now. And not now does not mean not ever. It could mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And so it's important not to feel obligated to things, but also not to box yourself in by saying never. Something that isn't right for you today might be right for you 6 months from now. You just don't really know. So leave your roadmap open, but also don't necessarily feel obligated to commit to things that you aren't entirely certain are the right thing for you. I think that applies to life. It applies to games. One of those things that you probably could take away from gaming. And you could also apply it to other parts of your life too. And there's this sense of betrayal. It's kind of weird, but it's true. We have a sense that because once we start something, we need to keep at it. Because if we don't, then somehow we're betraying the memory of it. We're taking something sacred and we're throwing it away, you know? And that's not fair. That's like if I said, okay, I like the Lord of the Rings. I'm a fan of the Lord of the Rings. I like it. And then I start to think, well, I ought to go play Lord of the Rings online because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, right? And then I think, well, I like ESO a bit more, so I think I'll play ESO instead of the Lord of the Rings online. And then I think to myself, well, in a way, did I kind of betray the Lord of the Rings franchise because I'm not playing that game about it anymore? Well, no, I wouldn't say that. That's not what it's all about, Like you can like something, but that doesn't mean that you need to be all about it all the time. You can enjoy a television show and then you watch it until you're tired of it, until you kind of are done. And then you don't anymore. And that doesn't negate the really good experience that you had before. You could enjoy a television show for 2 seasons, and then the 3rd and the 4th season just aren't cool. And so you don't watch the 3rd and the 4th season, but that doesn't mean that the first 1 and 2 seasons weren't really, really amazing. See, we want to put things into this bucket of, all good or all bad. We're going to be in it for the rest of our life forever, or it's totally worthless and it's meaningless and just forget it ever happened. Well, you could have a relationship that had really good elements of it, and then you move on and the relationship isn't there anymore because it's in your past and it wasn't perfect. But then you also can look at it and you can see the good things that you will always have with you to celebrate and to value. And it doesn't mean that the fact that it wasn't all consuming forever doesn't doesn't mean that it wasn't something that was truly special and continues to be truly special in your life experiences. I've played a lot of different MMOs over the last 2-3 years as I've gotten into MMOs, and many of them, after initially playing them, I stopped playing and I switched to a different one. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have a good experience while I was playing them, while I was experiencing them for the first time. It's just I didn't continue to play them over and over again after a certain point, but that doesn't negate the good experiences that I've had. I think it's important for us to think about this and realize that we can include a lot of different things in our lives and we can enjoy them. We can have good experiences, and we can also not be 100% bound to any one thing. You can be casual and you can still have a serious gaming hobby. You can move on to other games and you can still cherish the memory of the ones you used to play. I'll never forget how much fun I had, how much imagination I experienced playing the Sierra Online King's Quest series of adventure games back in the late 90s. And yet the truth is, I don't really want to play those games today because I've already had that experience. I don't need to have that experience over again because the one experience I had was enough. But that doesn't mean it wasn't good. It just means there's a point where it's complete enough without needing more of it. So whatever you do in life, my challenge to you, my challenge to me, would be to be spending your time in a way that brings joy into your life. And if it doesn't, then don't be afraid to do something else. Don't be afraid to take a break. It's true. Sometimes you take a little bit of discipline and you apply it to your life because you don't always feel like doing everything that you do. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of a sense of routine. Maybe you have an exercise routine and sometimes you don't feel it, but you still get up and you go get your exercise in, even if you're a bit tired. I get that. But if you consistently don't get very much joy out of something, then you probably ought to just accept the truth that it's not the best fit for you, and then find something that is, because life does have a lot of lovely things in it, a lot of diversity, a lot of different options and paths that we can choose. There's not really a lot of reason to box ourselves in with this sense that we have to pick one good thing and then never afford ourselves any other options after that. Let your imagination be free and have a good time in life. Don't take yourself too serious. That's a big thing. It's important because so many people are so uptight, they're so determined to be taken seriously that they just don't really have fun in life. Even in gaming, there's a lot of people who take it seriously. I mean, how many people are there out there that get angry about something in a video game? Like they changed the way combat is balanced or something. There's always something, and then people are getting frustrated and they're angry and they're agitated about a game. And there's thousands of different games out there. Like, why are you getting so frustrated? Why are you irritated about something that's supposed to be fun? It's not really that the games are bad. It's not really that the experiences are bad. It's that we have unreasonable expectations. of them, because we want things that should be a small part of our experience to define our entire experience. And then, when they fail to live up to our unreasonable expectations of what they ought to be, then we curse them and we get so frustrated because they let us down. But really, it's just our expectations of what they ought to be that have let us down, not the things themselves. So, with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.